Welcome to an all-new episode of the Work Shoot Wrestling Podcast. This is Corey Richmond, joined by Jason Brooks, and we are, for the first time in a long time, joined by the host of Morin's Law, Christopher Morton. Christopher, welcome back to the podcast again. And Jason, how you doing today?
I'm all right. I just had a virtual report card pickup where parents have to come and talk to us, and it's very strange to do this stuff virtually after all this time. But glad to be here. Glad to talk wrestling with the two of you. Chris, glad that you're on to talk with us about wrestling. It's been a good week.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a while. In fact, I think Impact was still TNA last time I was on.
Oh yeah, that is true. It's only the 14th name change, I guess. 13th.
And now they're having the biggest pay-per-view in the history of the company, probably.
Well, unless you're AEW and we don't actually bring it up, but
they did mention it for one sentence, but we'll get to that.
Get to that momentarily. But Chris, before we start all the fun, just once again, let everybody know that Chris has a really entertaining podcast where you can check anywhere you listen to podcasts, Morin Law, and you can also check out Christopher Morton on Twitter. Very entertaining to follow. I do, and I'm sure everyone else should. At Morton_Law, where he gets into entertaining conversations with everyone in the wrestling industry, to Kevin Kelly, to Triple H, I'm sure, Court Bauer, certain guys we may talk about today in different ways. But Chris, you want to let people know a little bit about your podcast before we start all the fun?
Sure. It's a hybrid podcast. I've been doing it for about a year now. It's a lot of fun. I mix in my stand-up comedy with my insight on wrestling, along with some occasional sports talk. And just so everybody, also I have a YouTube channel, Morton's Law Podcast, along with the by the way, I've been banned by Michael Cole blocked me. I forgot to say that. Yes, Michael Cole blocked me. And I think Shawn Michaels may have blocked me, even though I didn't really say anything horrible to him. I think I critiqued the leg slapping in NXT because obviously it's banned on the main roster, but yet I'm still seeing it on NXT. So I don't think he liked that too much.
Well, we were blocked by Jerry Lawler. I don't think we ever actually spoke to Jerry Lawler. So, I don't know what happened there, but
he's a cretin, so it's fine. I'm fine with it anyway.
Well, if you were a 17-year-old girl, you wouldn't be blocked.
There you go. But let's start things off. AEW week 2 on its own. Once again, was over 1 million. Was down slightly in the demo. Once again, lost to the MTV The Challenge, which is season finale. Leo Rush can say that he was on the #1 show on Wednesday nights consistently, even though he got voted off after week 3. What did you guys think of week 2 of On Its Own? I mean, the big things coming out of, was the women's match keep on getting better. MJF's promo, the idea like we led off that the title versus title really wasn't spoken about. I know you wanted to speak about, Chris, the idea of where we might be going with when it comes to Adam Page. But Jay, where would you like to start off with?
Yeah, I think I'll start off with the one thing I bang on AEW most about, other than the fact that everything happens very quickly, is their women's division. And I think WWE really, really dropped the ball with Conti. We talked about her a lot when she was released and said, hey, she's not ready yet, but she has a lot of potential. She has a good look. She has that judo background. She's beautiful. You could see some potential in her. And she wrestled one of the best women's matches AEW's ever had. And so her and Shida wrestled, and she obviously, so much of the credit goes to Shida, but they wrestled a hell of a match. And I give Conti a lot of credit. I think she's someone who they can eventually build stuff around. And so, that's maybe my biggest takeaway. And the fact they're really hyping up this blood and guts. I mean, they're giving this thing so much time. It's really, really crazy. So, but yeah, the women's match, I think, is one of my bigger takeaways from it.
Chris, what was your thoughts on Conti and Shida? I know you're someone who most likely has been a little critical of the women's division. Listening to your podcast, that's hasn't been a strength of the company. What do you think of that and, the women's division as a whole?
Well, first thing I'll say is I just want to piggyback off what Jay said to a degree within Conti saying is NXT dropped the ball. If you think about their roster and the talent they have, there's a plethora of talent in which you would look at Conti and say, okay, well, she's a cut above all these other people. And that's why perhaps that happened to her. And then also don't forget that the possibility of just improving, getting better over time. Maybe at that point, she wasn't what she is now, and she's learned from her mistakes. Don't forget, Serena Deeb is now there in AEW, so I'm sure they're tweaking some of her flaws, and therefore she looks better. Also, the match, yes, as I said here in my notes, the match was really good. I mean, look, that was the best she's looked. Shida was incredible. And in fact, what I like most about this match is that Shida worked borderline heel here. She gave us an edge, a different look. Yeah, therefore, it was better that you see Conti selling like a babyface. If I were to tweak anything in terms of critiques, like you say, Corey, I like to say things about this division. I don't know if this was on the announcers, but I guess it was, because there was a spot on the floor where there was a vertical suplex, and for whatever reason, they called it a brainbuster. And if you're going to call that a brainbuster, well, then that should be a move to go home off of, because that's a devastating move. And overall, not to go off on a tangent here, but that's what we talk about in terms of AEW modern wrestling in general. If you're going to do a crazy move like that, that should be your pre-go home move.
I can see that. And one of the things I would give him credit for, which AEW never does, one of the things that they do, they have a lot of content off TV. They have the Road to series. They've got Dark Elevation, Dark, being the Elite. But one of the things they did really well this week was the Road to series. They highlighted their 3 major matches for the show. And what they did was this time around, and it was like maybe 40 seconds, they showed highlights from that Road to series right before the match. For someone who really isn't super invested or was just watching because they watched for the first time last week because there was no competition with NXT, you saw a little bit why Ty Conti this match was so important to her. Why?
They could have done it the week before, maybe. You know what I mean? Maybe give us a preview the week before. They've been previewing Blood and Guts for 8 weeks now. The match isn't until May. This is for the world title. And we got a 40-second preview of Shida doing some karate moves. Let's maybe do a bigger preview. Let's hear more about Ty Conti's story. Let's hear about her being released from NXT and how she had to make her way back and how she's at the depths of the bottom and she's had to improve and get better. Let's talk about her story. We still don't know anything about her except she's gotten better. If you just watch AEW and never watch NXT, all you would know is she's pretty good in the ring, and apparently she's Anna Jay's friend, right? And that's they pump Jade Cargill up. We know everything about her, but the woman who fought for the title, we barely have heard her speak. That's still an issue that AEW has and continues to have. Wrestling is about characters. It's about getting into characters. And they continue to do this thing where the women characters, other than a few, are not really that important.
I mean, I see what you're saying there, but like I said, I watched the whole entire Road 2 video.
This isn't about Road 2. They had 1.1 million people watch this. Road 2 had 150,000? I don't give a shit about Road 2. It's great that they do it. It's wonderful that they do it. But there's a lot of content out there. You need to get your viewers, your 1 million people now who are watching the show every week, to get who Tay Conti is, so they're not, so they're into it.
And Jay also, I'm sorry, Corey. And Jay also, it's a 2-hour show. Think about all the extracurricular stuff on that show that could easily be cut instead of, in terms of putting a package together for Ty Conti.
Do we need Sting out there every week?
Right.
60 years old. Where's he going?
Well, you wonder segment by segment. We don't know this week what did the best in the ratings, but there's a reason why Sting's out there. He does well in the ratings for people. But before we move on, I thought they did a really good job with the match. I thought afterwards with Britt Baker coming out, telling you this is your next challenger, the way that they have been setting her up with challenging the ranking system over the last couple of weeks. And then the minute this match was over, she came out, they did the big graphic saying she's number 1. And we pretty much know that Double or Nothing, this match is happening. We've got, a month to build this up. They've been, at least in my opinion, I think they've been really good at slow builds. I want to see what they do over the next 4.5, 5 weeks until we get to Double Nothing, Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend, whichever one comes first. I'm as you can see, I'm great with holidays. This is Jay's debacle every week, trying to figure out what the hell I'm saying. But, I think you've got something that could really go well. I think this is the age of the dentist, or however they're going to say, with Britt Baker as your next champion. I think Shida's done a great job, and I thought it was really cool that part of that package was Shida saying she's been a champion during the pandemic era, so she's never really had a title, a title match in front of a live crowd. She's champion for over 300 days, but in front of basically no fans. And now this is going to be the challenge of if she could beat Britt Baker, who from the beginning, she was supposed to be the face of the company. And now she finally looks like this is the moment for her. And, I'd like to see how they're going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one positive with this match too is they didn't announce it, as JR sometimes gets a little bit sexist with the women's wrestling and calling the women Jezebels and that sort of bullshit language we used to hear in the 90s. They did a good job of calling this match a little bit more like a pro wrestling match. And I do feel very positive about the build for Shida because they have built Britt Baker. She's one of the best built characters on the show. And so I think she's absolutely going to win the title. I think there's no doubt about it. And I think that they're going to build up to a good match because of what they've already had invested in her.
Real quick, if I may, when I watch matches, I'm always curious about what finish they're going to go with. Because if you're building Conti, I thought maybe there's a possibility of Baker coming out before she did and maybe costing Conti the match and saying nobody else is going to beat you for this title but me. But to be honest and fair, their ending was fine too. I didn't have a problem with that because they focused on wins and losses, something that Tony Khan has talked about since day one. So their ending to that worked for me also.
Absolutely. One of the other big things on the show, for 2 straight weeks, we've had, or two out of the last 3 weeks, we've had really good promos by either Jericho and MJF. A lot of people really enjoy Jericho's promo from a couple of weeks ago. And then this week, MJF's retort with the sit down with JR, I thought was to another level. I think that when MJF knows something matters, he can be at times the best promo in the game right now. And I thought that really helped. I mean, it's gonna be interesting what they do next week with this parlay and building up this show for Blood and Guts. And there's been rumors that Blood and Guts might be the whole entire show on February 5th, which we can, on May 5th. Holidays, months, I got no idea what but I really do think it's going to be interesting, the build next week and everything going forward. But MJF, I think, knocked it out of the park. I think he's so good when it matters. And I even thought Santana outshined Jericho in their segment. And I really like the fact that I always thought that Sammy Guevara was going to be the number 2 guy in that stable when it came to talking, but Santana really shined. What was your thoughts, Jay?
All right, here's a question for you guys. Yeah, I thought Santana was great. And I think he's going to be one of those guys who really comes out of this good. We didn't hear from FTR. Jake Hager said like one line. Wardlow was in there a little bit. Sean Spears, I don't think he talked at all. Are we worried that some of the and I know, the Young Bucks talked about the fact that everybody's in the stable. And they said, I think it was Nick Jackson specifically, he said, well, it works in New Japan and it's easier to get everybody on the show if you have stables. But are these guys being overshadowed a little bit? The Sean Spears, and I know he wasn't in anything before, but FTR, are these guys being overshadowed a little bit by this feud being basically Jericho and MJF?
Chris, you can take that.
Well, I was just going to talk about in general. I'll answer that in a second. But I was just when you look at Wardlow in terms of how he was built early on and as the bodyguard of MJF, and then he's kind of now, like you just said, he's really not thought of. And they teased that breakup with him and MJF, and we never got anywhere with that. And look, let's be fair about Sean Spears. I've said this from the beginning. He's essentially the Steve McMichael or Paul Roma of this group. I mean, does he really belong in an upper echelon stable? And when you just okay, real quick, here's the one thing before we continue with that. The one thing that bothered me about this particular promo is that why are they saying promo? How many people understand what a promo is and how you cut a promo? That's more insider lingo for what percentage of their audience. That bothered me a lot. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I don't know. I mean, that really didn't bother me because I guess I've come through the idea that the AEW, and this is, I'm just, you can say it's an AEW mark, just forgiving everything. But when I think of the AEW fan, I think that's more of like the hardcore fan who knows like the inside terms, and maybe I just forgive it, but I never thought about it as a bad thing. But I can see your point where the average fan who might be tuning in for the first time and everything else, and you got to look at that every time. You might have new people joining. It didn't really affect me one way or another, but I can see your point there.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal for me. At this point, with these insider terms, I mean, it's just what we hear from these promos, basically, in general. So those things don't bother me too much as long as it's not like too insider. So yeah, didn't really bother me at all. But to the point of the being overshadowed thing, I mean, Chris, you touched on it, but Corey, what were your thoughts on that? Do you think some of the group, particularly maybe Pinnacle, are being overshadowed a little bit by this?
I don't think so. I mean, if this is an ongoing thing for months and months as this goes along, I mean, I think the bigger problem with all this is your first, and I think, Chris, you might have mentioned this on your podcast, the first match in this feud is the War Games match. I know technically you had the match with MJF and Jericho to get into the Inner Circle that started everything off, was the one-on-one match. But when your first match, technically of a big match quality, is the War Games, it's a weird situation to begin with. But I think MJF's promo was so good, and what he's been doing, at least in my opinion, is rubbing off on FTR and them just being there in that group.
I don't agree with that at all. MJF talked and they looked at him. That doesn't make them look stronger at all. I completely disagree with that. Completely. Because FTR came in, they don't need any rub. FTR came in saying they were the best tag team in the world. They went against the Young Bucks in a really, really good match. We know their reputation. They've been in the WWE. They've been in NXT. They don't need any rub from him. I completely disagree with that.
Yeah, but I think there's also times when you had like the Four Horsemen. Yeah, there were times.
This isn't the Four Horsemen. MJF is not Ric Flair. Let's slow down with that. MJF is great and has a lot of potential and has had some great promos. It's a long time for him to be Ric fucking Flair.
I'm not
a
saying
long time.
But the idea is that's what he's supposed to be portraying now.
That's the idea, but FTR is already a big time tag team. They're already there. That's the whole narrative thing that we're supposed to say as wrestling fans, that he gives him the rub, or it's okay to say MJF looked great and the other guys sat there, didn't do anything. That you know what I mean? Like, that's okay to say. We don't have to do the narrative thing all the time.
But like, Ole back in the day, I know this is before some of our listeners most of them were born, but Ole and Arn as the Minnesota Wrecking Crew were over before they became Horsemen, and they didn't have to talk. Every once in a while you heard them talk, but a lot of promos, it was Rick who was talking in those promos. So I think, and Tony Khan tries to have the formula of using things that worked in the past as a foundation. Now, if they go and see the ratings of these segments aren't working and people are complaining on forums or online, on Twitter and all the other forums that really don't matter a lot of times, are saying that why isn't FTR speaking and FTR is not getting anything from this, then maybe they'll change course. And if they don't, then they're not going with the time.
Corey, they're not going to look at the ratings and say FTR is not talking, so we're not going to do that. Like, that's not what they're going to do. They're going to continue down this path and see how things go. I don't think FTR not talking. I'm saying in this particular feud, I'm not saying this is how it's always going to be, but at this point, in my opinion, some of the members of the Pinnacle specifically are being overshadowed in this. And this is an MJF against the Inner Circle feud. That's what it feels like to me. And I feel like FTR, who has been on a good run before, who was with Tully, who were cutting their own promos, who were doing their own thing, have been overshadowed. So I disagree with you here, but MJF has looked great, but he's looked great. So we could move on from this, or maybe Chris could be the referee, the man in the middle to tell us who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, I really don't have much of an opinion on it other than the fact that, like what Corey said earlier regarding this being what you would call a blow off to the feud, and this should be longer. And I said the same thing about Cole and O'Reilly. The way they had that match end looked like a blow off to a feud, but now we hear that that's going to continue. And there's got to be a better way to do this. And I don't know how AEW can get around War Games and it not being the end to this feud.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to be the end. But one of the major things from the show this week is something that we complained about. Impact champion Kenny Omega will be facing, Impact soon to be most likely champion Kenny Omega, AEW champion, will be facing Impact champion Rich Swann this coming Sunday at the Rebellion pay-per-view. If you watched AEW this week, you had a quick insert during a commercial, and then Don Callis during their promo segment for the Elite kind of mentioned the fact that he was going to go and try to unify a title. Now, I know that nobody on this podcast thinks that Rich Swann has any chance of winning this match. Rich Swann is, to everyone's idea how good or not he is, and if he should be even in the spot of being the champion. But how do you go and try to make something even viable or somebody should care about when you don't even talk about it? I know that you're trying to go and get everything over, and you're trying to get the ridiculous Nightmare Family versus the Factory, which is terrible, and certain things on the show every week. But how do you not give a minute and a half or a couple of minutes? And I'm not saying Rich Swann has to be on the show. He should be. How do you not even have a highlight package during the actual show, not during a picture-in-picture? How do you not have something talking about this, Jay? Tell me I'm crazy, or I'm hoping you agree with me on this.
I mean, first of all, they have so much stuff on this show. I don't think they have time. But yeah, I mean, the relationship has been strange. I thought there would be, maybe we'd see Fire and Flavor on there, on the show. Maybe we'd see Jessica Havoc on the show. I thought we might see, TJP could be on. I thought they would do more. This partnership has been the Good Brothers are on there every week, and Omega is on Impact occasionally. I mean, that's been the relationship, essentially. It sounds like this relationship was basically to get the Good Brothers on AEW without them being contractually obligated to AEW. And so you have kind of a one-sided relationship. You're probably going to have Omega win the title. So when you have a one-sided relationship, like, this is what happens. I mean, I've been in some one-sided relationships where I was the one side and I was the other side. And like, it doesn't always go your way. It usually doesn't. So I don't know, but I agree with you. AEW absolutely should have done something, like anything to and I've told you before, I don't think Rich Swann doesn't look like a champion to me. But at least do a video package. When Kenta was going for the US title, he'd sit there, he did the go to sleep. I mean, now I think that's part of the problem, right? Kenta doing that is a big deal. Rich Swann coming on TV, people might be like, we don't care. So I think that's also maybe part of this too. I don't know, but it's strange that they didn't at least have a video package for it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Corey. Also, I think though, what if, could we talk about the relationship that with everyone now getting along in terms of New Japan, Impact again, and then AEW, what if there's a screw finish here where Omega doesn't win? Because if you're not going to promote it, then he comes on next week. Are they live again next week or the week after? I'm sorry. When is AEW live again?
They're taped this week coming up, and then they're live for Blood and Guts.
I just feel like if he's going to come back with the title now in 2 weeks, then how did he get it? You're not telling us how he got it, which makes me think there's a chance maybe he gets screwed out of winning it. Who knows?
One thing I'll say that before we move on is Tony Khan, which his word has kind of been his bond, which you can say good things and bad things about Tony Khan. Tony Khan said there will be a definitive winner in this match. And I guess the other part that it makes me crazy about this, you're promoting that you have Mauro Ranallo, who hasn't done wrestling in 2.5 years now, and who's a lot of the mark wrestling fans, the people who have maybe lost interest, are actually excited about it. I know, like our friend James Saad is a big Mauro fan. He might actually watch this show as a result of Mauro being, part of it. And, you didn't even promote the fact that Mauro's on the show. I mean, it's like, what are you doing? It makes no sense. And there's a lot of things that I forgive AEW for. And if Jay can speak for like 45 minutes on all the things I forgive that make no sense in AEW. That there's no logical sense of why you don't do it. I mean, Tony Khan trying to play the heel on Busted Open this morning, or it was yesterday, saying if Impact wanted, to promote their pay-per-view, they would have done what I did and bought TV time. That's a funny little line, but when push comes to shove, how are you going to get people to care about this show on Sunday when most people don't have access TV? I'll watch if I can, the Twitch feed or something else, but what's going on here? You have to.
I guess here's my question though for you, and I agree with you, but just playing devil's advocate for shits and giggles, if it's not AEW's responsibility to promote an Impact show.
Your
I
champion.
mean, it's their responsibility. They're already giving Impact this great gift of Kenny Omega, which is gonna, they're one of their last pay-per-view where they had the 6-man tag was one of their highest rated pay-per-views they've ever had. So they're already giving them Omega, and the internet wrestling community knows that Omega's wrestling as well. So it's not really up to them to say we need to spend all this time on our TV show promoting Impact. Like, we don't need to do that. It also maybe for them is like a heelish move as well. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. I mostly agree with you, but it isn't really their responsibility to promote it.
That's a great point, Jason.
Chris, before we move on to NXT, I know that you wanted to speak about Hangman Adam Page and what you see coming next. So how about you lead us off on that conversation?
Yeah, real quick, just the match in general with Starks, if I can. That was a really good match, although there was a bit of an odd botch there by, I think, the announcers and everybody involved, where Starks lands on his neck and they say he landed on his feet. I'm like, no, he didn't. What are you talking about? And they all tried to cover it up. I mean, I guess it's as bad as Michael Cole at WrestleMania, right? But ultimately, this was a good finish for Page to win this. And then, of course, Cage comes out, and now they've announced that for next week. My issue with Page is that they built him up for this long. Again, this is the second time. So I think personally, it would be great. Now, they announced the match next week, but unfortunately, the FTW title is not on the line as of now. So therefore, my idea would have been, because Taz is involved, and this makes sense based on the prior company he worked for when that title meant something, is if Page won that title and then threw it in the garbage can and says, this title means nothing to me, I want one other title, and then calls out Omega, and then we go from there. That's just a thought in general about Page, because he has to go somewhere from this. This cannot be back to nothing after, because I just feel like he's, all right, I'll put it to you like this. My question to you guys is this. Which EVP was responsible for the Dark Order? Whose brainchild was this?
Good question. I think it was the Young Bucks.
Okay, answer this question. In the last few months, he's been with the Dark Order. Is it fair to say that he's gotten them over, or they got him over? So, and the answer, that's rhetorical. What?
Well, you know that I'm a bigger fan of the Dark Order than you are, but I think they've helped each other, and I think the long-term storytelling is here at either Double or Nothing or at All Out. It's going to be Omega versus Page, where he wins the title, and possibly, which I don't know if it's time yet, Dark Order, Silver and Reynolds versus the Young Bucks as two of your bigger matches. I know Jay most likely doesn't think that the Dark Order is ready for that spot.
No, after all these other tech, they're gonna give Reynolds and Silver. Come on. I agree. I agree with Page. I think him joining the Dark Order is mostly silly, because I think that I love the Dark Order. I think they're a great mid-card gimmick stable. They're great. They're a great mid-card gimmick stable, but that's what they are. And Page is bigger than the Dark Order. He just is. And to me, him being in this stable, I think makes him look worse, because it's a mid-card. It's a mid-card gimmick stable, which is great. It's hilarious. Put, Sean Spears in there or something. But what you want to do is put a mid-carder in that. Don't put a upper main event level guy in there. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But, yeah. So that being said, I do think they're going to build up Page to win a title. I think it's going to happen at All Out. That's my prediction. But there's a lot of other stuff for Omega to do too. Christian, all these other things. So, but I think eventually we're going to get a Page Miro. This is fantasy booking way in the future, but I do think Page eventually wins the title. But I don't know where they're going with him, but I think to Chris's point, this has to be the time for them to keep building him up. I think they keep saying he's a number 1 or number 2 contender.
Right.
So, but I think at Double or Nothing, you might see Omega and I don't know who else against Eddie Kingston and Moxley. That might be a tag. It might be a tag match at Double or Nothing.
I think you might see I think you might see the Young Bucks versus Kingston and Moxley for the tag team titles. But I could see it going that way, or maybe a 6-man tag, or something even very elite versus somebody. I mean, see a lot of different pieces on the board holding off for the world title match at All Out. But
so Corey, hold on real quick before we move on. So you think that the Dark Order is helping Paige?
Absolutely. I think because it's with the gimmick that he's doing right now of the guy who was thrown out of the Elite and who was lost with the whole thing with the drinking and not sure what his direction should be.
He's still drinking.
He's definitely still drinking. I think for me personally, I think it's worked, the idea that he's not sure where his place is in this company, and he's trying to find someone to replace the Elite, and this kind of keeps him 1 foot in with the Elite storyline and 1 foot out, where you can do all the stuff with the Elite, work all these other angles, and keep him away from the title for a little bit longer, but still have him where you do these interviews where Alex Marvez is asking, so what's your opinion on this? And he's like, all right, I'm going to go do something else. And he never answers. So that he's still part of it, but he's away from it far enough that he's doing something else, and you can still do what you need to do with Moxley and Kingston, and it makes enough sense why he's not going for the title yet, with him being the number 1 contender.
But answer a question for me. When you go back when AEW first started and he was doing the cowboy shit, 3 tag team titles, you're telling me he wasn't more over then than he is now?
Absolutely not. And he wasn't ready to be champion then. I think with all the stuff he's been through, with the tag team stuff, with getting over with unbelievably getting over with the drinking gimmick and the stuff he's doing with the Dark Order, I think he's more confident. I think he's better in the ring now. I think that he's ready to be champion. I think
before the Dark Order stuff, he was ready. I do agree with you. He wasn't ready. I do agree he wasn't ready at All Out when they had Jericho against Paige. I don't think the Dark Order has had anything to do with it. I think he's been developing that personality since he's been in AEW. Now, Dark Order may have accentuated it, like whatever. He's been goofy on there, but I don't think it's changed. I don't think it's changed them at any point.
All right. Well, there's a lot of interesting conversation in regards to AEW this week. Once again, for the second straight week, they were over the 1 million mark. It's going to be interesting to see if they continue this pace. I mean, before we move on to NXT very quickly, from what you saw over the last 2 weeks and with Blood and Guts coming up in another week, do you think that they're going to continue this pace of over 1 million viewers? I don't know if there's a reunion show or not next week for the challenge, which, was the only thing that killed them in the 18 to 49, which basically trounced them. I think they got like a 0.58. Do you think they stay over 1 million and stay, high up with the 18 to 49? Or from what you've seen over the last week or two, you think the number's going to go down? Jay, what's your gut say?
I was going to say, I feel like I've been starting off, so I'll have Chris start off on this. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Jay. I think ultimately this week said a lot, because I speculated how much it could drop, and I thought it could go down to 900 or even lower, depending on what. Now, this is what I've said on my show about the NXT fans watching AEW. Conversely, I think the AEW fans are more loyal to their product, which is why you haven't seen the NXT number jump so much as the AEW number has. So therefore, if those NXT fans continue to watch, then yes, it can stay at this number, if not even go up.
Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, right? The 1 week spike or the 1 week drop. And I always say it's about patterns. And now we have a 2 week pattern of these are kind of the ratings that we're seeing from both companies. And I think this is pretty much what we're going to see moving forward. I think when there's bigger matches or, when there's bigger segments, I think things can change depending on the news. Obviously, we've had a lot in the news lately. So depending on how things change, maybe the ratings can go up or go down. But I think this is kind of the pattern we're going to see for a little while.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think this pattern is going to be interesting, and it's going to be a real test to see what Blood and Guts does in 2 weeks. But NXT Takeover, NXT by itself for week 2 went up, stayed about the same in 18 to 49, went from a 2-2 to, I believe, to a 2-3, that 18 to 49 demo, but it went from an 805K to 841. So there was a 9.5% growth within the number. I think that's a really good sign. Jay said it's a pattern. We'll see where it goes from here. I think they had good momentum from the takeover shows. But first thing I want to talk about this week, Cool Kyle. I put on the front page as a new picture for the Wrestling Life group on Facebook. Was one side was this picture of Cool Kyle and the other was Orange Cassidy. Of course, the two opposite sides of the spectrum. One's totally a gimmick who does occasionally a wrestling move. The other one's doing a weird gimmick right now, who's one of the best wrestlers in the world. But I'd love to get your guys' point of view. What did you think of week one of the Cool Kyle gimmick? I'll say right off the top, it doesn't feel like a main event gimmick to me. But, you know, I was wrong when it came to Orange Cassidy at first. He's one of the most popular guys in all of wrestling. I'm not saying we're getting Orange Cassidy in Cool Kyle. But, Jay, what was your thoughts of Cool Kyle? I know you're a huge Kyle O'Reilly fan from the Future Shock days in ROH.
My first thing is let's give it a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow. You're playing the Corey angle here. All right.
Well, because we don't know if he's just like happy now that like he won. And so he's like, it's like, you know, I'm on the beach now, I'm relaxing or whatever. Because he didn't come out like that when he wrestled Cameron Grimes. He didn't come out like Cool Kyle. He came out with his regular ring gear. So, you know, and also we've been seeing what he's been wearing, you know, the Metallica shirts, and he's been dressing, I think, like he normally dresses like in, you know, in real life. So I think this was just a 1 week thing where he just feels relaxed and relieved that he, you know, won a big match. I don't anticipate anything. I don't think he's going to be dressing like this moving forward. But I do think his kind of character development over the next 6 months is going to be interesting. Like, how does he develop? What do we get from him? He seems like kind of like a goofy baby face. I think that's kind of who he is as a person. And I think he's going to try to accentuate that as a character. But his development, I think, is going to be interesting. I think it's going to be really important for NXT because they need another strong baby face. And can he be that strong baby face who really delivers for them? Not just in the ring, but also from a character standpoint and, you know, from a storyline standpoint.
Chris, what's your thoughts on Cool
I
Kyle?
think his initial promo lacked something. It lacked it. It didn't come across as him. I don't know who he is behind the scenes, but it seemed, if I hate to say this, forced. And I don't know how a regular audience, obviously you have people around ringside chant. Listen, the regular fan base is going to cheer most of what he does. I get that because he's a face and people love him, especially his in-ring work. However, with this gimmick, I just don't know if you have a bigger fan base of people falling asleep during that promo. I don't know. I mean, if you look sometimes at you really can't judge it off this, but you look at the people behind him on the boards, nobody's reacting to anything. And I just felt like the promo lacked, but then when Grimes comes into the ring, then he picked it up a little bit. I thought he was more interesting coming off of Grimes as they worked back and forth than he was solo. And to be fair, Grimes really outshined him on this. Grimes looks like the main event star from the vocal aspect of it.
I could see that. I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I said, I'm more just taking the comedic value of the Cool Kyle thing than anything else. I still think that there's a lot of great things in Kyle O'Reilly. And I do think that we absolutely have not seen the last of, you know, Adam Cole. I don't think this feud's over. And I think that the return of Adam Cole will most likely get rid of the Cool Kyle gimmick where he's going to be...
I don't think it's a gimmick. It's 1 week. Look, what are we talking about here? He came out for 1 week. He said he was happy. He said it was, you know, he's excited, and that's why he was dressing like this. Let's give it longer than 2 weeks. Let's get to the important thing. The fact that I was right once again. Jason Brooks at work, shoot pod. I'm usually right about wrestling, but with Corey, I'm always right. Corey, let's get to the Zoey Stark thing that we talked about. I'll let you lead with it.
All right. So last week I was a little bit scared and confused on why you would have Zoey Stark as the first opponent for the debuting Sarray. After Zoey Stark had just been Toni Storm, one of your bigger stars in NXT UK, and a person a lot of people think is one of the future stars of NXT and just in general in Toni Storm. and then, having her basically being fed to your new fresh toy in Sarray. And I was absolutely wrong. The idea, the fact that Zoey Stark looked better coming out of this match than she did going into it. I mean, you can't have someone continuously lose big match after big match, or they slowly turn to someone you don't care about. And of course, I'm going to sound like two sides out of my mouth when I say the idea that, Jungle Boy continuously losing matches when he goes for the TNT title, it doesn't hurt him because he's, as good as he looked in the match. So I'm going to sound like a two-faced person here, on that. But I thought Zoey Stark looked really good. I think that the idea that Tony Storm coming out after the match and attacking, continuing that feud, now that makes more sense. Sarray looked really good. I'm not sure if she's on the level of, an EO or some of the other, Asian stars that we've gotten over the last couple of years from this one show, but she looked really good. And it just continues the depth of stars that we have within this NXT division.
I mean, you can just say those two words.
Jay was right once again.
So I will take that. I agree. It was a great match. And I think it'll be, and they built, the little segment with, go ahead, Corey.
Just say, I don't think this is going to come out of my mouth for a long time. Jay, you may disagree, but I think it was the second best women's match we had this week.
I agree. I thought the Tay Conti man, and sometimes it's expectations too. Like you thought Zoey Stark against Sarray was going to be good. Shida and Tay Conti you were hoping would be good. But yeah, I agree. I like the EO segment. Frankie Monet, I think, is going to be interesting. I mean, NXT, I've said this before. NXT should basically they have a women's division, and there's like some dudes there. I mean, that's what it kind of appears to be. But yeah, no, really, really good stuff from Sarray. I think she could be interesting. I enjoyed her work. I think she's going to be a little bit more mat-based than some of the Japanese stars like we've seen, like Io and Kairi Sane. So I think it could be good. Chris, what were your thoughts on the match and maybe the NXT women's division in general?
Zoey Stark is incredible. I mean, just the way she works in that ring. I mean, obviously she's a veteran. She hasn't just appeared out of nowhere. She's been in this business for a while, and it shows. And what I got a kick out of this. Now, I don't want to say Beth Phoenix doesn't know anything about Stardom, or I'm assuming that's where Sarray came from, correct?
Stardom, yes.
Yes, correct. So when Beth Phoenix is putting her over as a Joshi performer and everything she said, did you hear that whole Beth Phoenix part? It just made me go, okay, someone fed her these lines. I can't believe Beth Phoenix is watching any of that. And furthermore, yeah, I'm not going to lie and say I've seen Sarray before because I haven't. So this was the first time, a lot of good work. And yeah, at the end of it, I just said, I came out saying that Stark looked better here. I thought in terms of, okay, who looks like the star? To me, Stark did. That's just my thought. I know who they're going to push long-term, but by the way, what was the finish that she used, guys? Whose finish was that from the past? Or not finish, I shouldn't say finish, but whose move was that from the past that she used? Anyone?
What was the move? I don't.
Sarray's finisher, that suplex?
Yes, what was that? Because I looked at it 3 times and went, oh. It
kind of looks like a version of like the rock bottom, but I don't know. Who?
T-bone Tazplex is what it was. It was a slight variation of a T-bone Tazplex.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. All right.
Yeah, like I see. And before I forget, just want to let people know that Chris is bringing in the views tonight. We got Alex Mercado saying, hello to Chris. He may or may not know Chris on the outside world.
I never met him.
So, and our social media ambassador, Jackie Endy from You Don't Know Jackie podcast, throwing a couple of words in there, trying to get herself over like she does every week quite well. But sticking with the women, what are your guys' thoughts on what they're doing with right now with Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai? Because it looks like from the promo last night, they're already starting to figure out that they're going to split these two up. And, and also regards to the EOS segment with that interview, you're setting up Frankie Monet, that feud. So, I mean, it looks like you're continuing, like we said before, the depth of the women's division. As Jay so politely said, it's a bunch of great women, maybe a couple of dudes there. What do you think of all these people who are setting up as challengers? You also have Mercedes Martinez. So Jay, what's your thoughts on the depth and what they're setting up here?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's just fantastic. And I thought Io was going to be gone, so I'm surprised she's there. But I love that she's talking in English. I think her talking in Japanese would be fine. But I like that she's talking in English. I think it's going to help for when she goes to the main roster and Vince screws her up. But at least, so I love that kind of sit down format. I love them like watching the tape. It reminded me of like what you would do when you interview like an athlete or whatever. You're kind of watching his old games and, like the Last Dance documentary when Jordan's like watching people, watching interviews that people did against him and he's like laughing at them. So I love kind of the sports feel of the interview that they did. And then Frankie Monet, the only thing is like with the dog, it's like the dogs might run a little bit. Like, I don't know how obedient that dog is going to be all the time. That dog is a star though. Very good by the dog, staying in tune and doing all that stuff and not running away. I have a dog. He absolutely would have run away. He would not be interested at all in any of this stuff. But it's the division's just stacked. And there's so many options and possibilities for everyone. And that's one thing I love about wrestling. I love when it's not, okay, this guy is mad at this guy and that's all it's going to be. Raquel Gonzalez could go against freaking anybody. Mercedes Martinez could go against anyone. They're setting up certain things, but there's still a lot of different ways they can go. So I thoroughly enjoy NXT women's division.
Oh, 100%. In fact, last week when Frankie Monet debuted, and of course her segment was overshadowed by having Bianca Belair come back, having Rhea Ripley come back. But before that, she owned that ring against Raquel Gonzalez. She was the star. Listen, we talk about Frankie Monet, aka Taya Valkyrie, and the impact she's had on, no pun intended, that she's had on this business and how long it took her to decide to go here. I'm inclined to believe she made that decision. I want to believe they wanted her from the get, and she just stayed loyal for whatever reason, and despite the fact that her husband works in this company. And she has star written all over her. She does everything right. That first promo last week, when I should say this past Wednesday, Tuesday, forget about the date change all the time, that she had that back and forth with Io. Io, of course, went Japanese on her. But ultimately, and with Raquel Gonzalez, this division is so loaded that it's hard to book because you have to protect people, but at the same time, you have to almost like throw darts at a board and say, okay, this is who I'm going to put over this week. It's not easy to book that.
I agree. And to Chris's point, and that's why Zoey Stark had lost. You got to have somebody lose. You can't have Aaliyah and what's the new woman, Jessie Kamea?
Yeah.
You can't have them losing every week. And Jessie Kamea wrestled a decent match with Mercedes Martinez last week.
Agreed.
When is she going to get a push? So it's. I mean, you have to have somebody lose. And I agree. I mean, is Dakota Kai going to be kind of the gatekeeper? I think that's going to be kind of her role moving forward. So she might be the one to have to lose, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they book these women and how they, have them lose and win matches and not have screwy finishes all the time.
Right. And when you look at this division, I'm sorry, Corey, last thing I'll say, when you look at this division, are they really missing Ty Conti? I'm just talking about the depth of it is my point.
I agree. Point there, how do you get over? I mean, and this is what you see with, places like, Mission Pro Wrestling that Thunder Rosa runs, where Lacey Evans, who is now Zoey Stark, came from, where these women got a chance to show themselves on some of these smaller shows, and you'll see where some of these other people may get a chance. But the roster is so deep with talent that sometimes a person like now a Chelsea Green, who's no longer, who's been recently released, didn't get that opportunity. Perazo, who's the champion at Impact, who's had maybe one of the best years last year of anybody in the industry who wasn't in NXT. Sometimes you got to leave because it's so deep a division to get that opportunity. But I think it's gonna be really interesting to see what they do short term. Will it be Mercedes Martinez? Will they go with the heel turn right away of Dakota Kai, basically turning on Raquel Gonzalez? Will you have just basically Io going to the main roster and just being there to put over Frankie Monet, and then maybe she leaves? I mean, I don't know how much longer Io will be there. I could see Io just doing this last feud with Frankie Monet, getting her over, and then going to the main roster. I don't know if I see her still staying long term. That'd be great for her if she does, because she won't get screwed over by bad booking on the main roster.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be really interesting where they go short term.
One thing from the chat, Alex Mercado saying SmackDown and Raw needs more female wrestlers. Well, they fired 4 of them last week. So, and he's right. They do. I mean, the lack of depth in in the women's divisions on the main, we don't need to talk about the main roster more than this, but the lack of depth in their women's division it's a sorry state. And one of the best women they have, Nikki Cross, they don't really do a whole lot. I know that she's getting a little run now, but they really need to do more. But the thing is, it's like, if you're Io Shirai, I guess you want to go to SmackDown or Raw for the money, but like you're a superstar in NXT. So
I do think this, though, there's a formula, if you notice, with people that first come in, they don't always go over right away in high profile matches. When you look at LA Knight, Kushida, and other people that have come through the system, it takes time before Triple H puts them in that position. So don't assume that Frankie Monet is going to go over Io Shirai right away. I just don't know.
Yeah, I could see that. But like I said, if you want to put Frankie Monet on the map, beating, basically one of the longest reigning champions, that might be a way to show that, for people who don't watch Impact, you want to give her that moment in the sun. I think that could be a way to get her over. And then you can just have Io going out after 2 losses, kind of similar what they did with your Raw Women's Champion now. And just, that's how basically she went on a little bit of losing streak, putting over Raquel. I think the way you can maybe do that by putting over a couple people on your way out, kind of the old school way of doing it. But Chris, it was great having you on the podcast. How about you let people once again know how they can follow you on Twitter, and let them once again know about your podcast and everything you're up to.
Thank you. Yes, it's a Morton's Law podcast. Of course, Morton's Law, it's available on every major platform. And also you can follow me on Twitter at Mortons_Law and Morton's Law podcast on YouTube. Thank you. Real quick before I go, I just wanted to say, Jason, I know you guys don't have gimmicks here, but if I were to give you a gimmick, I would call you the human wheelbarrow, because you carry the show every freaking week. And furthermore, I just wanted to, because Corey, you always say, oh, I trash AEW, this and that. But how about this? I want to applaud 2 things before I go out. First of all, the way Christian worked with Hobbs was incredible. The way he put him over and the way he lost was perfect booking. You say I dump on Tony Khan. Whoever came up with that finish was ideal, because they made Hobbs look good while then making him look like the heel that made a mistake by trying to mock Christian and then paid for it. Perfect finish. Secondly, and last, the Darby Allin Jungle Boy match. Bravo. And do you know why I say bravo? Because they didn't do 3,000 dives. I didn't have to hear Excalibur saying about his TP for his bunghole and every move that he uses. And it's just like that match, because if you looked at the first 5 minutes of that match, they started and did wrestling. They gave us wrestling. And now, and even the finish was perfect. Everything about it. So there's your AEW for you, Corey. See, I don't always trash it.
You're a lot more fun when you're trashing AEW. But if you want to listen to all that and a lot more on a little comedy, a little bit brilliance when it comes to talking sports, or how much, I'm sure you love Andy Dalton and what they're going to do in the draft when it comes to Chicago Bears, be sure to check out every week Christopher Morton and the Morton's Law podcast, everywhere you listen to podcasts, just like us on Anchor FM. So, Chris, once again, great having you on the podcast. Won't be as long. We won't take, a 2-year layoff next time. So we'll have you on again real soon. Thank you.
Chris, before I go, I want to tell you something real funny. So, Illinois betting is legal. I live in Chicago. I don't know if you know that, but so I make, Corey knows this. I make a million bets all the time, and I love futures. Those are my favorite bets. Julius Randle plus 33, most improved player, whatever. So I did a bet on the Bears to win a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. I did it before Dalton. Because I was like, before Watson wanted to touch every massage therapist. Because if they got someone like Watson, they would go from being, I think they were plus 3,500 to, plus 1,100. So I'm like, I'm going to put $10 on it, whatever.
Right.
And get Andy Dalton. And obviously I'm like, I'm just going to take I was able to cash out most of the money that I put on that bet. But I was like, they could have had, and again, I don't know who they were going to get. They tried to get a bunch of people. I completely get it. But they go from maybe expectations of getting somebody good to Andy Dalton again. The Bears fans here, everybody is just so upset. Everybody is so upset in Chicago. It's amazing. It is hilarious for me. I love it. But I'm sorry for you as a Bears fan. You guys are probably going to stink this year. And Chris, go Pack, go.
Oh, that hurts. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Chris.
Bye.
So, Jay, as we talk a couple more quick things here before we call it a day, MLW is going to.
This is entertaining. Chris trying to figure out Chris leaving the Zoom. All right. All right, MLW, go ahead. I'm being funny.
So we'll do that to try to get rid of Chris there. But MLW made a couple announcements this week and another, okay show. So Jay, the two major things that came out. July 10th, they will be having live fans when they go to the ECW arena, which, everyone and their mother, when you're a wrestling promotion, you got to go there. They're going to go and have social distancing. People are going to apparently may have to take tests or not. And then also on May 5th, they're going to go and take a break after the Myron Reed versus Leo Rush rematch. I'd like to get your thoughts on both those things. The idea of going back on the road, might be the first one to actually do that besides WrestleMania for major promotion. And also basically taking this break, basically right after you get on, I guess the third thing was Viceland this week.
Yeah. Well, it's Vice, right? Not Viceland.
It used to be Viceland. Now it's just Vice TV.
Now it's just Vice TV. So as the train goes buzzing by, I didn't know. You were like, Jason, you got to watch MLW, the Court Bauer announcement. So I ended up watching the whole show. By the way, the TJP match was actually pretty good.
Cool.
I didn't hear the, maybe I was like, I misheard. I didn't hear that they were taking a break. So that's interesting. The fans
coming up with whichever member of the Von Erich family is facing Tom Lawler. And then
I know the May 5th one. So after that, how long are they taking a break for?
Till July 10th when they do the
so they're taking a break. Wow, that's good for them. Good for them. I wonder, and it's not going to be a pay-per-view, right? It's just going to be a regular show. So I guess, that's what they can do. And that's going to be that's going to be when they're going to be on Vice. Oh, good for them. I think it's a good idea to have a little bit of a break. I think we've talked about this for a long time about wrestlers getting a bit of a break and freshening up their characters, things like that. I think it'll be interesting to see who MLW brings in because they do have kind of a lack of depth in terms of their roster. So with them being on Vice, are they going to bring more people in? There's a lot of free agents out there. We know that. I don't know exactly if that coincides with some of the people leaving. I'm not sure when the 90-day clauses are up. I thought it was like July 14th.
Yes, a couple of days later.
A couple of days later. Okay, so they can't get any of those guys. But it'll just be interesting to see what they do moving forward. I know they hinted at trying to have a women's division back in the day. I don't know if that's something that they do, but I'm glad that a company like MLW is doing well. I think they do things that are like kind of rough around the edges, but then they do some really fun stuff too, and they're not afraid to take chances and be innovative. And so I'm happy for them. I'm excited for them. I think Court Bauer has done a tremendous job of being like the guy who runs everything. And so, I'm excited to see where they go. In terms of having fans, I talked with someone, actually one of my old high school buddies on Facebook about this. He's in the Wrestle Life group as well. I think that it's fine. And it's probably time to open things up. Now, you have to do it safely. You can't have a bunch of dummies there who have COVID. Apparently WrestleMania people are coming back with COVID now. So you got to do it safely. But if you do it safely and you have social distancing and you have a bunch of, people there, maybe show your vaccine card if you got a vaccine. If you don't get a vaccine, you can't go. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm sorry to be an asshole, but now it's available for anyone 16 and older. And by that time, it'll be whatever, it's months from now. If you don't get a vaccine, it's fine. That's your choice, but you can't go to this shit. Like it's got to be so if they do that, then I think, they can have a good show. And I mean, this will be the first show in the United States in an indoor arena that's had fans, right? This will be the first one.
Other than WrestleMania,
Well, WrestleMania was outdoors.
That's right. Yeah.
So the first indoor arena to have fans. It'll be interesting to see. I know AEW's talked about going on the road at some point. We talked about that yesterday off air. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all really works out moving forward.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting on those couple of fronts there on how they handle all this stuff. I think it's an interesting move that you announce a TV deal with Vice TV starting in May 1st, apparently is when they'll start with older material, I guess older episodes and different things on Viceland. And the first new episode, I guess, will be on May 5th with, like I said.
Sorry to interrupt. Let me ask you this. Do you think the show changes at all? Right? Like it can be a rough around the edges show, cursing and just rough around the edges. It's not a kind of a crisp TV presentation all the time. And that's one of the things I like about MLW. It is a little bit more ECW style. And I think that Court Bauer's an ECW fan, and that's, I think, his style. Do you think the style of the show changes at all?
No, because Vice, Vice, I keep on saying Vice, that's from what I remember from back in the day. But if you watch anything on Vice, a lot of their programs, it's a lot of the stuff is a little bit edgier at times, where they do stuff dealing with, a lot of social issues and the idea of like legalization of pot and what's going on in the world with different, situations with healthcare. And they do a lot of stuff where they don't care on what people think on how they're going to be portrayed. So, they take chances. So I think that's one of the things that most likely made it an interesting choice for MLW, because they mostly knew that they would get a lot of leeway by a station that's willing to go out on the limb and, do things. And they're much more, to put it nicely, they're a much more liberal based station of, they did the whole last year or the year and a half ago, the whole, pro Bernie Sanders documentary on how, how the media basically barely covers him on any good subjects, and how, they didn't cover him because he's not the usual Democratic candidate. So, I mean, they'll go and take things and stuff they did with the wrestling documentaries and stuff. This is the same channel that we're going to have returning, Dark Side of the Ring in, basically 2 weeks. So I think this channel is willing to take chances and do edgy television. I
agree. Corey, you said you did, and I'll just, I'll tell people how the sauce is made. You just sent me a message about Impact and what I want to talk about for the pay-per-view. Let's just run through the whole pay-per-view real quick. Right. Some matches we'll talk about for 5 seconds. Some matches we'll talk about for longer. So let's roll with that. Vice does do a lot of very, very interesting things, you're right, with TV, and we'll see how MLW is presented on there and works. But I'm really happy that there's another company on TV that appears to be doing well. I mean, this is a great era for wrestling. It really is.
Yeah, and right before, I just want to say quickly, also came out this week that New Japan Pro Wrestling apparently had a deal in place, an offer from Vice as well. And they went and rejected that offer. I don't know if it was a barter deal or if it wasn't enough money for them, or if it was, a thing where they didn't want to be exclusive and Roku didn't make them, the exclusive thing. But, apparently they also had a deal with Vice that's come out that, maybe, I don't know if it was hard feelings by Vice, but it's come out that they also had an offer for New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, so this wasn't the first thing that they were trying to get. So, they've been trying to get into the wrestling game, looks like, for a little while. But Impact Rebellion this Sunday, we've already spoke about a little bit already. AEW World Champion unification match with Impact Champion Kenny Omega with Don Callis versus Rich Swann. I think we will totally agree. This is Kenny Omega is going to win this match. And I think the most interesting thing, which our guest a little while ago, Christopher Morton, said, we've got a tape show next week. I'm guessing he already has a copy of the title with them, which they'll be showing, the following week. Or, we just continue to be like, he's only going to be showing the title when he's on Impact.
This thing was planned out. I mean, this was
of course, right.
This was planned out. So I think Omega definitely wins the match. I can't see him not winning. Talk about the forbidden door. I think he wins the match. I think no question. I think it's gonna be a good match. It should be a great match. They'll have a lot to live up to with that Laredo Kid match at Triple Mania, because that was one of my favorite matches of the year. So let's see how they do.
Impact Tag Team Championship match. Finn Juice, Dave Finlay, and Juice Robinson coming back from their tour in New Japan Pro Wrestling, where they did at times, wear the titles. So that's at least, nice to know that they care enough to wear the titles, versus the Good Brothers in the rematch from, I believe it was the Sacrifice Impact Plus show. I would think you're going to get the titles back on the Good Brothers due to the fact of how much they're on AEW, and I think you look like a more important figure when you have titles around your waist, and I just don't know how much Finn Juice is going to be in the United States. So
yeah, quick for me, Good Brothers win, no doubt about it.
I think it'll be a good match. Their first match was solid. Matt Cordona versus Brian Myers on the match. Who I guess likes their toys more. I would have Brian Myers win. I think it would help him more, and I think he's been doing better work on Impact from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think Brian Myers is a contract employee. I think Matt Cardona is a per appearance, so I'm going to go with the contract guy and Brian Myers.
A match that I think will steal the show. I mean, even though I think the main event could be one of the best matches of the year, because you got Kenny Omega and Rich Swann, two great workers, but three-way for the X Division title match. Ace Austin, your champion, versus Josh Alexander versus TJP, who we spoke about momentarily on his really good match, which if you have a chance, go out of your way to watch the MLW match this past week, which will be on YouTube at the moment. I think you keep a title on Ace Austin because I think there's bigger and better things that you can do with him as the heel champion. But Jay, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think TJP is in there so that Ace Austin has someone to beat. And then Josh Alexander continues to look strong. So I think eventually they're going to give him a push. I think, after Ethan Page left, Josh Alexander stayed loyal. I think they're going to want to give him a push. He does need a personality reboot, but he's fantastic in the ring. I think this may be the best match of the night. Sometimes triple threats can be weird. So, but it should be a good match. X Division has been really good. Alexander and TJP had a match last week that was really, really, really good on Impact. Impact, it's funny. They've calmed down the comedy. They don't have a lot of stars. That's why Omega's there, but they have some really good wrestling, man. They really, really do. I think people should check them out a little bit more than they do. But anyhow, Ace Austin definitely wins the match.
Knockouts championship match. Most likely the person who's done the most from being released last year from WWE, Deonna Purrazzo versus Tenille Dashwood. I don't know how good I'm still till this day. I'm not sure how good Emma is as a worker. Sometimes I watch her. I think she's really good. Other times I think she doesn't know what she's doing in the ring. I think that this will be a good match. I don't think it will ever get to the level of, the matches we've seen in NXT or the Jordan Grace matches, that we saw earlier or late last year. I think this has a chance to be a good match. I fully expect Purrazzo to keep the title, especially with the possibility of, a Chelsea Green or Mickey Jane coming in, in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, Deonna definitely wins. It's been very little build for this match. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Deonna definitely wins.
Next match, I'll be honest, I have no interest in. You have, I'm sorry. Actually, I do kind of care about this one. I looked at it the wrong way. Last Man Standing, Trey Miguel versus Sami Callihan. I haven't loved the build to this match, but I love both these guys. I think Sami is one of the most underrated guys in the business. And I think Trey Miguel is a guy who's got a really bright future. And I'm glad. I mean, I'm super happy for his former tag team partners in the Rascals, getting the opportunity they're getting in NXT. But I think he has a chance in Trey Miguel to be someone who could even dethrone at the end of this whole entire Kenny Omega build, this storyline, be the guy who maybe takes a title off from somewhere down the line. So, I mean, I think really big things, but I'm not sure this feud is over. So I think if that's the case, Sammy wins at least the first match of this feud. Long term, Trey Miguel wins. But if it's a one and done, Trey Miguel wins. If it's going to go on for a while, I think Sammy wins the first match.
Yeah, I think Trey Miguel definitely wins. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do with Miguel moving forward. I think he still needs to get better talking and personality-wise. I've enjoyed the feud, the kind of back and forth that they've done. And so I think this is a good spot for Miguel to win this match and move on to potentially going against Omega, which I think that could be a really fun match.
Well, I think you do that a little bit down the line because I don't think he loses the title 1 month after basically winning it. But
no, I don't know if Miguel is going to win the title. I don't know. I mean, you'd have to have a rematch with Swan, but you're going to have to go against someone. And I think one person who is not on this card is Moose, which I think is also interesting, right? So you're going to have to elevate someone.
And Chris
so what'd you say?
Chris Bay.
I mean, Chris Bay's not on this show either. So, we'll see how all that works out. But yeah, I think Chris Bay, we've already talked about that. ASOS and Trey Miguel and Chris Bay are the guys you need to build the company around. So that's where that go. Let me go with this one. Violent by Design. Eric Young is out. I mean, I don't know how he's even going to wrestle in the match. He's probably going to just sit on the ring apron because he's got a torn ACL.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's going against Eddie. So Violent by Design going against Eddie Edwards, Willie Mack, James Storm, and Chris Sabin. This was a match to have a match on the card. I think Violent by Design wins. They're continuing to kind of push those guys. I just wonder what happens after this because of Eric Young's injury.
Yeah, I mean, this was the match on the show that I really didn't care about. I would guess the heels win because, when you're putting a bunch of guys together, it's most likely to set up something further down the line. So, I mean, I'll go Violent by Design. Final match on the card as of right now. And for all those, I believe the final Impact leading up to the show is actually on Twitch right now, which once we're done, I'll be actually watching. You've got the Knockouts tag team, Fire and Flavor, Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steele versus Jordan Grace and a mystery tag team partner. I would say I think they actually did a pretty good job with the whole entire send-off for Jazz last week. I can see maybe Taylor Wilde, who they've been doing all the promos for, maybe being the tag team partner. I don't know if you put the titles on Jordan Grace and whoever the tag team partner is, because I don't know how much longer Jordan Grace is going to be with the company,
Yeah, it's hard to say the contractual thing. We don't know. I think if it's this Taylor Wilde woman or whatever, you could either do a thing where Jordan Grace and this new person comes in, the new person and Jordan Grace don't get along, and you have a feud with those two. I think they should keep the belts on Kiera Hogan and Tasha Steele. I think they're one of the best things in Impact. But I'm a mark for them, so I will be very honest. I love the both of them. I think they're both great. I think they should keep the titles on them. So I'm just gonna go with my heart. But I think this Taylor Wilde woman appears. I'm not really that familiar with her, but I do think she probably makes her appearance, and it should be a pretty good match.
So I'm going to ask you what I asked you when we ever preview every show. I know that we're going to most likely one way or another, either via highlights or watching the show in full, see the Kenny Omega match versus Rich Swann because it's one of the biggest matches. Should be on paper. Wasn't promoted that way this week. But looking at this card, what's your interest level of a 1 to 10 for this show?
Sure. Now, also, you got to remember the show's at 3:00 on Sunday, right? 3:00 on Sunday.
Isn't it? I didn't realize it was that early.
Yeah, check the time while we're doing this. I think it's at 3:00 on Sunday because the time stood out to me. Remember, they were doing funny times because of like UFC and AEW. So I feel like it's 3:00 on Sunday or 3:00 on Saturday. It's a weird time. I feel
definitely on Sunday.
I think it's 3:00. But as far as my level of interest in the show, it's a pretty loaded card. You have a really good triple threat match. The world title match is something we haven't seen in a really long time, a unification of two different companies. You have New Japan with Finn Juice coming over in a good match.
8 p.m.
3 p.m. Yeah. So
8 p.m.
What'd you say?
It's 8 p.m.
I swore I saw a different time. I'm gonna look here, but yeah. So I think this is a very very interesting card. So I would give this, I don't know, a 7. I'd give this a solid 7 or an 8. I think this should be a good card.
Yeah, you know what? I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of good stuff on it. Once again, as I always say, I wish that, Impact was on a network that I got at my cable company. Watching something on the computer on Twitch is a pain in the butt, but it is what it is. I'm gonna watch, I'm gonna watch the main event at least. I think it's a really solid show, and I could think that this could be one of the better shows that Impact puts on. And I'm going to say it one more time. I really wish that AEW found a little bit of time on this show to either put Rich Swann on or at least do some sort of promo package besides as an insert during a commercial break. I'm saying that this show actually existed. That's the
It is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's true. So a couple of quick hits before we get out of here. As we're running a little bit short on time, and we once again want to thank Christopher Morton for joining us and giving a ton of time this week. EC3 was hospitalized for an infection. Hopefully he gets better soon. He really did a good job in that feud with Jay Briscoe, and we'll see how long he's out for. Jay, it's amazing. He's doing all this good work, and he gets COVID. He's out for their big show. Then he does a 19th anniversary show, and now once again, he's hospitalized. Sometimes a guy just can't get a break when you think he's a hot commodity. So
he did the 19th anniversary show, so right. he did the show. So yeah, I mean it's it sucks. The main thing is you hope that the guy's okay. Right. So hopefully he's all right.
We found out today or late last night why they did on Raw the whole time suspension gimmick. Charlotte is out due to a dental surgery, so she'll be gone for most likely a couple of weeks. I'm sure it's not a long-term thing. So this will most likely lead to another one-on-one match between Asuka and Rhea Ripley. Hopefully it's better than their last match. And Jay, I'm not going to talk about it, but congratulations on not watching Raw for the first week. You made the right decision. I have 2 more weeks before I fully give up on it.
Oh, I knew I made the right decision once I stopped watching it. I'm absolutely not going to watch it again. Well, I don't want to say watch it again, but it'll be a while.
Ronda Rousey, Nick Khan, one of the head operating officers in WWE, had mentioned on a conference call that Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch would be coming back in the soon. Well, Ronda Rousey is 4 months pregnant. Congratulations to her. I would be surprised if she's back before WrestleMania 38 next year, or sometime after that.
So Corey, they changed the time. It was 3:00. They said they moved it to Sunday night. Yeah, so it was 3. So at least both of us were right, because it's like Impact moves to Sunday night. So I think it was originally 3:00. By the way,
that's Saturday. I think at 3:00. I think.
No, I think it was Sunday at 3, and now it's Sunday at 8. Here's the problem: if you're gonna have a show, be consistent on the time. And I only recognize it because they kept saying like 3:00. Oh my god! Yeah, Impact. Sometimes they can't get out of their own way. In terms of Nick Khan saying that, Ronda Rousey was gonna be back, and maybe Becky Lynch. I mean, he couldn't have known that the woman was pregnant. So, I'm not gonna. I could kill WWE for like everything. I watched Raw for 2 minutes and I already was mad about that. So, I mean, I could kill him for a lot of things. I'm not going to kill him for him thinking like they might come back. And I'm sure there's a chance Becky Lynch could still come back. So, we'll see what happens. So, I mean, we'll see how things go. All right. So we are part of the Great Life Group podcasts and very proud and excited to be a part of this great team. Monday, we've got Dong City with Henry and Vince, a baseball podcast. Tuesday, we've got The Audible with Matt and Randy, over under a number of bets that I make on a draft, probably around 25. So interested to see what they do, what they talk about with the draft. Thursday, you've got us, Work to Shoot Wrestling podcast. Friday, we've got The Step Back with Jacob and Leon. the NBA season grinding to a slow crawl. And Oklahoma City I've never heard of any of the players in their team. And then Sunday, we've got Total Bases with Felipe and Sean, more of a fantasy baseball podcast. Corey and I might need some help there. So check this out. We are Worked Shoot Wrestling Podcast. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out. We are on Instagram and we are on Twitter at Worked Shoot Pod, WROKED Shoot Pod. The great Jackie Andy helps us with our Instagram. And I try to live tweet. I didn't do that much this week because I was kind of a little behind in the shows, but I'm going to try to keep up with the live tweeting a little bit more. And we'll see, maybe live tweet during this apparently Sunday night Impact show. We'll see. So yeah, check us out. And yeah, that's it.
And once again, in case you're joining us late, Morton's Law podcast with our guest this past week, Christopher Morton. You can check him out wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, if you want to go directly to his feed, anchor.fm/Mortons with an S-law. And you can check him out on Twitter at Morton_law for fresh takes on wrestling, sports, and a little bit of stand-up, a little comedy for your ears every week. But speaking of comedy podcasts, Jason, there's one that we often talk about you coming on, but you never actually get the invite.
You don't know Jackie. You don't know Jackie. Jackie Andy, Jackie Rachel, Jackie Corey, the comedy podcast for the ages.
Is it now Jackie Wheelbarrow, apparently?
I'm just carrying us. Jackie Andy did put on there. So Corey sent me the thing in the chat. Corey, just hop in on the wheelbarrow and go along for the ride. That's what he does every week, folks.
That's true. I'm
bummed.
Character success, as always. This week coming up on the podcast, we will be doing another conversation on tipping. This time joined by Jackie Quest, who Jason was part of a podcast with, others known as Jackie Johnny. We have an interesting conversation there, and Jackie Rachel returns from a 2-week absence, so part of the gang is back together, so definitely check that out. But Jay, final topic of the week as we close out, a show you've been raving about, I finally had a chance to catch up on, and the finals will be tomorrow, Friday, New Japan Strong. Give me some quick thoughts and let people know why they should be checking out this very interesting hour of television.
Yeah, so this tournament's just been fantastic. There's been so many good matches on there. The match that stood out to me last week was Lio Rush and Brody King.
Great match.
And I love when you have a really good little man and a good big man, you could say that their chemistry, the old Mysterio Brock Lesnar matches back in the day. I know Eddie Guerrero wasn't little, but he was a smaller guy next to Brock. They had great chemistry. I thought Leo and Brody King had tremendous chemistry. One of my favorite matches that I've seen, on TV in a while. And then the Hikuleo, Tom Lawler match, they just kind of beat the shit out of each other. So every match has kind of been a different style. Dave Meltzer's kind of talked about how NXT, it seems like every match is the same. I don't agree with him at all. I feel like AEW is a little bit more like that. But I think Christian's brought a different flavor in. Anyway, I digress. The New Japan Strong Tournament every match has felt a little bit different, a little bit different style, a little bit different feel to it. And I've just really thoroughly enjoyed it. Clark Connors looked good in his match. Ren Narita, who I've said before, I think is going to be a star. Hikuleo looked very, very good. And it's a good thing he didn't win because I think he still has time to grow. I think he still needs some growing to do, but I think he's going to be an absolute star in New Japan as well. But here's the interesting thing. The finals are Tom Lawler, who is an employee of Major League Wrestling, and Brody King, who has gotten a big push on Ring of Honor television, who I think may win the title at some point, who, worked for Ring of Honor. We talk about the forbidden door being open. Now, Lawler and Brody King have been on Strong for ever, right? But now it's different. You're giving one of these guys a title. So do they end up going to Japan to defend this title at some point? Is it just an American title? What do they do with the US title? How does this continue to open up the forbidden door to other wrestlers in MLW? Leo Rush is little, I think he's more of a free agent guy, but continue to open the door for TJP and guys like that who have been there. Does Chris Bay make a return? He was in the the junior tournament there. So how does this continue to open things up? Because with some of the young guys that New Japan Strong presents every week, working with some of these veterans, it really makes for an interesting dynamic of the show. And I think now that they have a title and a focus, I think that's going to make the show even better. It still can be rough. And the announcer there, not Kelly, but Kozlov, is that his name? He's horrible. But beyond that, it is a very enjoyable show. It's only an hour. You can fast forward through some matches. I'd highly recommend watching Lawler against Brody King this week. I think it should be a good match. I also think Lawler has really stood out. You watch Lawler a lot in MLW, and he's got to be a certain character on there. They don't always give him time to wrestle long matches, but he's been tremendous in this Strong tournament.
And speaking of giving a 400th plug over here, but Christopher Morton actually on Twitter had a conversation with Kevin Kelly about the announcing. And he said that that's something that they are working on, with making sure that Kevin Kelly is doing more of the bulk of the actual play-by-play and not giving so much. That's something that they've been working on. And going forward, it's going to be more of Kevin Kelly doing the play-by-play and allowing him to do, the color stuff. And they've realized that they've allowed him to do a little bit too much with jumping in on his calls, and how, that's basically something that they're going to fix.
That's interesting. I like that they've looked in that, because he is terrible. He's just really bad. And it's not his English or anything like that. He's got an accent. That's no problem. But he's just not good. And sometimes they've had Rocky Romero be the commentator, and Rocky Romero should be the commentator. He should be the commentator. But I'm glad they're working on that. I'm glad Chris was able to have him on. But definitely check out New Japan Strong. It's been, he's better than Adnan Kirk. So let's put it that way.
It doesn't take much. And apparently he finally met Vince McMahon. So breaking news. Apparently that happened. But Jay, another great week of conversation. Once again, thank Christopher Morton and everyone in the Life Group podcast who gave us a little bit of information this week, of comments, and especially Alex Mercado and Jackie Endy, who decided to get herself over, as she always does, and helping us greatly with our social media at WorkShootPod on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, check out You Don't Know Jackie everywhere you can get podcasts. Jason, as always, the final word is yours, as we will more than likely be doing the show on a different day next week, because you will be on the road for the NFL draft with your yearly pilgrimage of alcohol.
Also, we wouldn't do a show right before the draft. That's crazy. Anyway, that being said, I think we're done here. See ya.